body and bone, currents of electric surging. Your beautiful soul, it touches me where I am hurting. Whoa, oh, 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 set me free. Oh, 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 set me free. Set me free. Set me free.
Set me free. Thank you, Hart Sawyer, singer, songwriter, great friend. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Seekers, sometimes being multi-purpose for several uses. And today we have an episode that we're going to bring forth that kind of continues in the scheme and theme of a group of series we've been doing, for several weeks now. Kind of a man in the mirror series where we're looking at ourselves. We're having honest conversations with ourselves, transparent conversations with ourselves in where we are. And in that sense, the man in the mirror part of it is taking ownership and accountability for where we are. And that doesn't so much mean to beat ourselves up as is to celebrate the fact that we are in control, which means anything we want is in the realm of possibility. There are no limits. Anything we want are in the realm of possibility. We just have to accept that, and then when we take accountability for it, we can then live with the priorities we place on things. So let's take a little deeper dive in all of this, and today I want to talk about a general topic called excuses. Now, excuses are kind of interesting because they're a product of our mind. There really is no such thing as an excuse. The word excuse, as I see it, is almost an absolute statement of victimhood. We have rationalizations, and I don't mean a psychological projection to create a rationalization. I'm not talking about it in that sense. I'm talking about we have rational things that happen in our life that aren't necessarily excuses. We could routinely leave to be on time at work 30 minutes early if we're commuting to a job or to a meeting or an appointment or whatever. And we're considerate in that sense. We set our clocks ahead. We set our timers ahead to where we're walking out the door to where when we leave, we're going to arrive 30 minutes early. As Robin Sharma says, always better to be an hour early than a minute late. And so with that, things can happen. The tractor trailer with toxic materials could turn over on the interstate and the roads be closed. So when you call your party that you're meeting with or your boss at work or whatever, it's not an excuse at that point. It's a rational, logical explanation. The challenge is our mind, okay? Our mind and our egos, and where we draw the lines between what's logical and rational explanations and a manufactured excuse, where we lean on the excuse as the justification for why we aren't where we are, okay? And excuses include being late because something does happen in the last few minutes that consumes 10 minutes of your time. You're getting ready to walk out the door and your babysitter just isn't there yet, and all of a sudden, your infant needs a new diaper. The average person, I think, would go ahead and change their baby rather than just continuing to get ready and wait for their sitter to show up and then force that situation on them. Any number of excuses, any number of things can happen, right? But that's why we leave a half hour early. That's why we say, I'm going to leave the house at this time. I'm going to leave the house at 9:30 when I know if I leave at 10, I can make it to the appointment. So we set a clock ahead, and we're determined to be punctual. We're determined to be early, and things can happen, right? But if we set our clock for 10 o'clock to leave, to show up on time, And that's assuming all traffic goes our way and nothing happens. No big trucks with hazardous toxic waste material dump over on the interstate or highway and prevent us from getting there. But just normal course of day traffic. And we know if we leave at 10 o'clock, we could show up 1 or 2 minutes early. Well, now if something happens at home before the 10 o'clock time frame, we use that as an excuse. I would have been on time except. I would have been on time except. Well, you were never planning to be early. And so the excuse at that point, the rationalization, the life intervention, as we sometimes call them, is not really a true justification. It's a justification when you planned on not having any time. And so if you're one of those people that are perpetually late, first of all, remember, you're kind of being rude to the other party. You're saying my life is more significant, that I don't have to be ready and on time, but you do. You should. This is why I don't like having webinars, live sessions, etc., and waiting 5 or 10 minutes. There's nothing more infuriating to me than when I have a busy day, a busy schedule, and I have a 9 o'clock webinar that I'm going to, whether it's a support webinar or a sales webinar, it doesn't really matter. But if it's scheduled at 9 o'clock and I clear my path to be there at 5 minutes before 9 in case I have any computer issues hooking up or whatever, and I'm there and I'm ready at 9 o'clock, and then the host comes on about 9:05 and says, oh, we're going to give it a few more minutes just so a few more people can arrive. See, to me, that's about as unprofessional as you can get. They're just waiting for the numbers to grow bigger so they can have a bigger impact, but they're really being rude to the people who are there on time, and they're letting the people who show up late justify their excuse. Okay? I've come to the point now where if I have a session and somebody shows up 15 minutes late and they're asking questions about stuff I've already done, I just say we covered that earlier for those that were on time and drop the hint that they could watch the replay. I'm not going to backtrack and cover that. So in your daily interaction, in your daily meetups and meetings and appointments, remember there's another party involved. It's the world doesn't revolve around you. It's not this self-centric world and universe where your life and your justifications and your excuses and your rationalizations are the only ones that count. Other people are making sacrifices to be on time. You need to be on time. All right, let's get back to excuses. That was just kind of exercising and digressing to one of my little pet peeves. We want to talk about the man in the mirror. So, first of all, remember what our ego is. And now, again, I'm not talking the true psychology-based definition of ego. That is something much different than ego as we refer to it in today's modern pop culture motivational empowerment arena and niche. So what we refer to now with ego is that thing in our subconscious that is an overly confident mechanism that makes us bigger, more important than we really are. It makes us think we are. And therefore, our voice has to be heard. We have to make that comment on the post, etc. Right? But we also have ego that's protective. And this is the part a lot of, especially traders, don't understand. They may feel they're introverted. They may feel they're not outspoken. They may feel they're the last thing on the world compared to someone with arrogance. They can still have massive ego. Ego is there to protect you, to isolate you from the world and let you know that your, I'll say, failure, but we're talking about lack of success at this point in time, that lack of failure or that lack of success in time, that failure, it doesn't want you to experience and have feelings for. So the way it does it is it protects you. It's like we've used the example before about the mother nurturing their child. And if we have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and they're out running on the sidewalk in front of the house and they fall down and scratch their knee, and we're looking out the window, we know for the most part they're going to raise up with their head and be crying their eyeballs out, right? Especially if they look down and they see a little blood scratch mark on their knee. And you go running out, as the mom or the dad, and you swoop them up off the sidewalk and hold them in your arms and curl them up just into that, fetal position like they were years ago in the womb and make them feel so comfortable. It's their comfort zone. It's their, and if they're younger, you got your security blanket, their security blanket in tow. And it's that all, we start that sentiment of security in our comfort zone. So we make them feel and a bridge to the younger days when they were just a tiny, dependent infant and they had nothing there in their world except for mommy or daddy or aunt or uncle or guardian, whomever, to hold them and to cuddle them and to coddle them. And especially in those times of hurt, because, as a parent, the hardest thing to endure, and I don't care what age the kids are, the hardest thing to endure is to see your child in any kind of pain. So we swoop down and pick up that child and reassure them. And, we brush off the bruise and we look at, oh, it's not bad. Here, let me kiss it and make it feel better. And all of a sudden, the child is nurtured and feels much better. Now, let's speed up the videotape and let that be your 13, 14-year-old child. And they're out there on their skateboard or longboard on the sidewalk. And they have a bunch of friends over and they're all sitting on the front porch and they're taking turns watching people skate by the house. And your child falls off the skateboard and lands and scrapes their knee. And you're watching this, observing this whole thing, looking out the kitchen window or whatever window in the front, and you see this happen. You don't run out to the sidewalk with your blanket and pick up your kid and hold them in that fetal position and try and nurture them and bridge them back to the days when the only thing they had in their world was mama or daddy holding them tightly like that. Your 13, 14-year-old child surely would not appreciate that, especially in front of their friends. Now, the difference is, as a parent, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, we discern the difference between our 2.5-year-old falling on his knee and our 14-year-old falling on their knee in front of the house. And we understand when it's time to say they need to just, suck it up, buttercup, and when that's not the right thing to do for a very young infant or child. The trouble is our ego doesn't know the difference between the two. And the ego is just going to come in there with that protective blanket to create whatever kind of security it can, whenever it can, and protect us. And so a lot of people, by observation and dealing with thousands over years, I can tell you, don't understand this form of their ego. They only think of ego as that big, huge, bombastic, personality. Often referred to Donald Trump as somebody they might think in that arrogant, egotistical way. And they say, no, I'm not him, therefore I don't have an ego. This side of the ego is even, I think, more sly than the arrogant, overly confident ego, because this is something we've bridged to for years. The programming for this ego is so deep, and it does go back to those early days when if we found ourselves in distress, we could just cry and the nurturing parent would come and comfort us and bring us the security we needed to have. And that just gets transferred to this side of the ego as you grow up and remains with you forever. And so the challenge with this is that ego, unlike the parent who can discern the difference between when it's appropriate and not appropriate to provide that nurturing, protective covering, the ego does it all the time. And we have to have the self-awareness and the accountability and the responsibility to actively look and seek out this protective nature, because it will dominate our lives. Remember, the subconscious, which includes this kind of programming from your ego, looking for comfort zones, looking for the security blanket, dominates 98% of our adult daily life. And so sometimes we just get into the routine of letting it happen, and we're not even aware it's happening. It just happens. It's that, it's the kind of thing we want to get to with our trading, where we're in the zone, we're in the flow, and it just happens dynamically, and we're not consciously having to think about it. That's the ego's ability to provide that nurturing, comforting security blanket whenever we feel challenged, whenever we're uncomfortable, whenever we don't like the world around us. And so remember that. Okay? Now, last week we talked about the programming and the authoritative you that exists in our life. You being your parents with negative programming. Oh, you'll never do that. Oh, you can't do that. You're not good enough for that. And then in some exceptions, in some cases, the parenting, which is consciously aware, and you have a chance to be that kind of parent where you understand 0 to 7 as programming, where you understand an individual's, because you understand the physiology of the brain and our anatomy and the way we work as people and the way the brain works, and you understand all that, and so you know the RAS set that's evolved with that programming is only going to continue to protect that belief set and further it, because that's what RAS does. It furthers the existing belief set by screening out the possibilities for other things. So we know the initial belief set that you are, whether it's good or bad, is reinforced by our RAS. We know that that resides in our subconscious. We know our ego tendencies reside in our subconscious. And so we have this 98% of our adult life reality is automatic actions that were programmed into us. And so it's hard to escape this reality. This is why self-development, and then not just blind self-development with a goal. And this has been my effort for the last several years, is to not only push your persistent pursuit of self-development, but focus on some attributes of that, some partitions, some subcomponents of self-development, to understand your sensory information gateways, to understand the physiology of your brain and how it works. So then you can understand and put together a plan to attack that, to work with it instead of blindly working where it's always going to win. You know, your 2% effort against the 98% subconscious effort, you're no battle. It's no battle for you. You can't win it, right? So left to lack of understanding, left to lack of education, left to naivety, you're not going to win that battle. And so it takes a very strong understanding and determination to say, I want to understand what's going on here so I can put together a plan on the self-development side to attack it. Just reading books, or somebody, oh, this is a great book, and you know, so now it goes on your list, or you run to Amazon and order it, or you run to Audible and order it. You have to have a game plan for your self-development to work on this specific part. It's the first place really traders need to work in the self-development realm. Once you get past the compound effect, okay? The compound effect holds true for RAS. Let your RAS keep screening out the stuff you need to see for life being different, and do that and do that and do that. It just only reaffirms and strengthens the programming that's already there in the current belief sets that you have. So let's go back to the beginning here. When I talk about excuses, it almost just reeks of the word victimhood. Because you don't have excuses. You have missed priorities, which you take accountability for. Not missed, but missed prioritizations, which you take accountability for. And once you take accountability for it, then you could rearrange your priorities. Okay? So remember, it's easy to be a victim. It's comforting to be the victim because it says you're not accountable for what happens. Oh, you wanted to, but some outside force took over. When you take ownership, and this is why I use the analogy or metaphor of you being a CEO of your own company, regardless of whether it's trading or business or network marketing or graphic design or whatever it is you're doing. If you be the CEO of your own company, it means the buck stops here. There's no place a CEO can take excuses. Nobody's going to have a sympathetic ear. The board of directors is not going to sit there and let the CEO rattle off 20 excuses about why they aren't where they should be. It's not tolerable. And so by placing yourself as the CEO of your own company, which you really are, it means you're accountable, responsible, and the buck stops with you, not some outside third-party excuse. Remember, Lee Miltier, okay, female motivational empowerment speaker. I quote her all the time. There are no victims, only volunteers. There are no victims, only volunteers. Which means victimhood is something you sign up for. Victimhood is something you succumb to because it creates that security blanket, that bridge to mama holding us tight, daddy holding us tight in their arms when we were an infant. It takes us all the way back to that, and that just incredible comfort and security feelings we had with that. That's what victimhood allows you to do. So once you realize there are no victims, there are only volunteers, you can say, well, I'm going to unvolunteer for that. It's not healthy. And all of this comes under that big umbrella of comfort zone, which in the end we know is a pain zone, because the compound effect does take place. And while it feels good in the moment to retreat to our comfort zone, in terms of long-term objectives, long-term dreams, long-term goals, the comfort zone is the most damaging thing we have. That's why it can be the pain zone. It feels good now, but it destroys our future. So what I see with a lot of traders is they don't have a deep grasp of all this. Now, I say traders because I work with a lot of traders. This could be true for a network marketer. This could be true for a brand new entrepreneur trying to build a business, whether it's a mom and pop or brick and mortar kind of business or online business. Whatever you're chasing to be the vehicle for your dream, for your independence, for your financial freedom, I see people using excuses. And a couple of things there. A couple words we want to replace. Right? Y'all have heard this before. So replace but with and, because that gives you the understanding that you get to make a choice. Oh man, Tom, I really would like to join you Sunday night for dinner, but I've got this obligation, blah, blah, blah. See, the but removes it from being your decision. The but is an excuse. How about, Tom, thanks for the invite Sunday night. That really sounds interesting. And I have a previous engagement. So now you're telling Tom, I'm going to own up. I have two opportunities in front of me. I have to make a choice. Okay. Now the other word we want to remove is the one I just used, and that's have. Let's replace have with get. Okay. It's the same as removing but and putting and. It relegates the reality to you have a choice to make. Instead of saying I have to or I have this as the excuse, say I get this. And it puts decision making on you. It's not a third party action. You're not a victim. You don't fall to victimhood. So the challenge with all this is that I see people manufacturing excuses. And again, they're going to believe the excuse. It makes them a victim. So let's look at where you are, where your big picture is. And if you've been at it for any time, and in your chosen field, if that amount of time is time that you see other people making their goals happen, and you've been at it and your goals aren't there, for the most part, not always, but bell curve, you probably fall into that group that has allowed excuses to make yourself a victim. You've had choices to make, you've made choices, but rather than taking ownership for those choices, you've allowed your head to use them consciously to make excuses. You've manufactured your own excuse. See, when you have priorities that prevent a goal, you don't have frustration. You have happiness because you're pursuing what you want. The challenge is I see people saying they really, 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 really want that big goal. They really want that dream they have. And then they'll tell you the whole stream of excuses as to why they don't have it. Now, if they say, I have this dream, but here's my short-term values. Here's my short-term priorities. Values are priorities. Values determine your priorities. I took a pretty big step back several years ago in deciding that for me, a value in the short term of supporting my son in his basketball efforts was a very important thing for the stage of life he was in and what he needed. And I realized this was not a 10-year commitment. It was just a several-year commitment. And that had more priority to me for the 5 years I was involved in that than maximizing, optimizing the amount of money I could make. And I was happy with that decision. It wasn't an excuse. At the end of the year, I wasn't crying because years before I made twice as much. I made a conscious decision to give up between 3 and 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 4 seasons of the year. High school basketball has evolved into a 4-season-a-year sport if you're going to be competitive. It just has. I think it's sad, but it's the reality. And so it was huge. It was a huge commitment. Big time out of my day. The shortest amount of time in that span was a practice in our home gym. And that was always at least 3 hours. The commute there, the commute back. Workouts, practice, drills, a little talk afterwards sometimes, waiting for everybody's parent to pick them up or them to drive home, chasing them out of the gym some night. 3 hours, that was the shortest time I could have. Some of those away games, we had 3 levels of teams. We had a freshman team, a JV team, and a varsity team. If we're going for an hour and a half ride, let me tell you, they're all riding the same bus. And so I was there for the freshman JV games, even though my games didn't start till much later in the evening. Final varsity game over, players back to the locker room, change, dress, coaches debriefs, get back on that bus, an hour, hour and a half back home sometimes. There were 10-hour days, many away games. Weekend tournaments. Oh my gosh. You know, AAU, every weekend was a tournament. Every weekend there were major games. And some of them just far enough that it wasn't worthwhile spending the night because it was an expense. And so you drive an hour and a half there, and you got to drive an hour and a half back at the night, and then go back an hour and a half in the morning, and then come back an hour and a half that night. And again, the whole, liability, responsibility issue of making sure all the players had rides, make sure they got, adults taking them back. But that was my priority. That was my value at the time. I knew I'd return to bigger, greater things with my chase, which in my personal case is the Forex market and coaching Forex. But in that time frame, I had to sacrifice a lot. It was a conscious decision. And the sacrifice included the priority of my son meant more than money in the bank. My son meant more than more money in the bank. I surely didn't stop trading. I just stopped the amount of trading I could do. And so we all have priorities in our life that hit us from time to time like that. And we don't use them as excuses. There are things we choose. When you make a choice on a priority, you're accountable for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then you don't cry about not being at your goal. Now here's the problem, and this is the reason for the man in the mirror. A lot of us can take these priorities, these values that override, that delay the effort towards our big dream. And what we end up doing is then manufacturing other things to legitimize themselves to be the same kind of priority change, i.e., we're manufacturing excuses. And the reason for that is another subconscious programming, which is a lack of deservedness. It's an ultimate lack of self-worth. Now, again, on the surface, most everybody doesn't understand this. Most everybody believes, oh, hell yeah, I deserve to be successful. Oh, hell yeah, I deserve $1 million in the bank. Oh, hell yeah, I deserve the Lamborghini or the Bentley or the Rolls or the second house, or to bring my wife or husband home, or to lock up my children's education before they're 5 years old. You know, hell yeah, I deserve all that. That's your conscious talking. Your subconscious is saying, yeah, well, you might think you deserve it, but you aren't going to get it because you really don't believe that. And then that's going to control 98% of your thinking and actions from that point onward. So a lack of a sense of deservedness will manifest and rise up to sabotage, to create doubts and fears and limiting beliefs, and allow you to then create and manufacture excuses, because ultimately you have a fear of failure. You don't want to try because you may fail, and how silly will that look? So it's easier to create and invent excuses so you never have to show that you can be accountability for the effort you put forth. And that's as strong a statement as I've made on these sessions in 6 months. Deep down, you have a lack of deservedness. You have fears, doubts, and limiting beliefs about your ability to do something. And so rather than face the consequences of trying and failing because you still haven't totally packaged up how you see failing, you see failing the way the Western world teaches it. You're bad, you're no good, other people are better than you, and as if it's an ultimate tattoo on your forehead, F for failure, L for loser, rather than understanding it's part of the process. But that fear of failure has to then create, with your ego, assisted by your ego, has to create some sort of comfort zone. And the comfort zone then is, well, if I have excuses to not be able to do the work, then I don't have to be accountable for failing or succeeding. So it's a false illusion to begin with that makes you create these excuses. To truly create and generate from nothingness. The false illusion is the fear of failure. The false illusion is that there is failure rather than a succession of efforts that, when compounded over time, bring you the ultimate result. It's amazing how mankind knew this before neuroscience even came along and we understood how the brain worked. Think of, the old Western analogies, cowboy analogies. Oh, you fall off the horse? What do? Do you cry? I guess I'll never be a rider. Now, do you brush your pants off and get right back up in the saddle? How cliche. So before neuroscience came along and we understood the levels and the strengths of the components of our brain and the way we think and how that operates and sensory information gateways and all that, mankind knew this. Some people would fall off that saddle and they'd be done. They'd never ride a horse again. Championship level riders just get back up, brush their pants off and get back on and ride, and fall down and brush their pants off and get back on and ride, and fall down and brush their pants off and get up and ride. Because it's that volume of attempts that you eventually learn what not to do. And sometimes, even when you know how to do it, fate's going to come your way. The horse bucks a particular way, he stumbles a particular thing, and you weren't anticipating. Next thing you know, you fall off. Doesn't matter. You have your goals. You get right back on that horse. Whether it was your inexperience because you didn't have a volume of riding hours, or it was the horse decided to act up, doesn't matter. I will persist without exception. You're going to achieve your goal of riding the horse. Brush your pants off, get right back up in the saddle. Very few people have that understanding of what failure is and how it's a requirement for success. They internalize it because it's safe. It's the security blanket as the 13-year-old that falls on his skateboard, right? So the ego comes in and protects us. Because we have a fear of being accountable for it being a lasting failure. So it's easier not to get back up at that saddle and ride again, because we can use the excuse of, well, I got bucked off that horse. And we use that excuse in all our life. We use that excuse to stop us from our dream. All the time I hear all of the excuses in the world. And some of them could be made legitimate. And then there's two levels of that, right? There's the times where it's not a real valid excuse, but you can maybe present it in such a way, manipulate the party that's listening to you tell your story, that it seems like a worthwhile excuse. It seems like the force that's stopping you from achieving what you want. And then we have the people who just actually believe it themselves. You've got friends out there and acquaintances out there, maybe family members, and we've heard this many times too, Oh, I feel so sorry for him. He believes his own lies. Man, I really feel sorry for her. She believes her own lies. She's got a conviction to her own lies. And the reason people do that is because it justifies where they are. So if you're manufacturing excuses, if you're taking things, making them bigger than they are, you've regressed to victimhood. You've refused to put on the CEO hat as the guy, gal in charge of your own company. And you'll never get anywhere. Success will be elusive. And because you believe it, guess what? It further programs the existing belief that you already have about a lack of deservingness. I guess I'm just that one in the universe that, the powers, God, my creator, source, the universe, whatever you label it, wherever your beliefs reside. I guess they just don't want it for me. They keep putting these signs in front of me. Despite what I really consciously would like, there's a greater plan. All things happen for a reason. As if your fate was sealed the day you were born. Yes. I don't care how deep your beliefs are. Your source, your creator, your God did not choose the day you were born. This person's going to be successful. This person's going to be a failure. You have dominion over that. You have power over that. You're not a victim. It's not fate. It's not destiny. It's a choice. It's very uncomfortable to stand up and say, I'm accountable for where I am. More so, because you don't want to beat yourself up for the past. Let's say everybody has this realization today. Boom. As of now, you now understand you're accountable for your past. What that means is you're accountable for your future. That's a great feeling. That should make you the happiest person in the world. Nobody could put parameters to stop you. Nobody controls the limits of your potential and your abilities. Nobody could say or control a dream being too big to prevent it from happening. That's only you. So many people need that look in the mirror. Many people need to say, I am accountable for my future. There are no such things as excuses. Those are manufactured things to make me feel comfortable with my lack of deservedness. And if you have a lack of deservedness dominating, then guess what? Massive self-development to program. Got to do those group formations. Ask those you empowering questions. Let your mind go to work answering them in volume, daily, multiple times a day. Because otherwise that programming will continue to provide victimhood, will continue to allow you to manufacture excuses. And you could turn around and say, oh, well, this is what happened. I'm a victim. And you have that conversation with yourself. Well, why can't I be the success I really want to be consciously? Well, this happened and that happened and, life happens. Big victim. Get a big trophy, Victim of the Year. V-O-T-Y. Gonna make a trophy for that. V-O-T-Y. Anybody wants one? I'll make one for you. Victim of the Year. And that way, when somebody asks you, how you doing with this project, how you doing with that goal, you just reach into your cell phone, pull it up, and scroll to the saved pictures you have of you being presented your Victim of the Year trophy. This is why. See, I've got an excuse. I'm Victim of the Year. It's sad when we think about it, because that sense of victimhood, which is something we control, is the thing stopping you from the greatest life you can ever have. All of the things you can do with that life, all of the people you can touch, all of humanity that you can impact. Because it's more comfortable to manufacture an excuse than to say, yeah, you know what? I guess I didn't have a good enough plan. To say, yeah, what? I need to move out of my comfort zone. I need to do the things that move me out of my comfort zone. To say what? To say, yeah, I'm going to have to sacrifice some things to get what I want, or what I want becomes the sacrifice. Except for this, except for that. And those are the excuses we want to continue to hold on to, because they bridge us from owning our life to making us a victim. Now, like having ego self-awareness, nobody's exempt from this. We all have to work at it daily, because that programming to be a victim is so strong in our heads. It's not something that you cure. You have to fight it 7 days a week. And if you can't do it 7 days a week, you got to do it really hard for 6 days a week. The most successful people will still talk to you about their meditation and their time in prayer. I know the traditionalists are going to talk affirmations, but that's afformations. It's gratitude. It's future memories. Now it's grooformations, right? You're not going to find anybody successful that doesn't talk about it. They still work at it every day. But something special about you, because even though the most successful people use that to get where they are and then realize it's a challenge for them every day, it doesn't go away, you don't cure it, you have to keep on doing it. You can take a different path. You're that 1 in a million that's going to rewrite history. Ego. Ego. This is the silent ego. The most introverted, silent, quiet, soft-spoken people sometimes have the biggest egos. They've got the biggest protective blanket that's always thrown on them to make them feel comfortable. And it's comfortable not to be responsible for where you are in life. It's comfortable to not be the person accountable for where you are in life. We did an exercise, a month or two back ago about being the CEO, and you're being brought before your board of directors, and they want to hear a status report. Where are we and where are we going? And for every 100 people that listen to that, maybe 5 actually did the exercise. Why is that? The others didn't even want to contemplate being in charge of their lives. The others didn't even contemplate wanting to accept that they're CEO. Because right away that puts them on the line. Many paid it lip service. Many listened to that session and go, oh, this is empowering. Oh, this is great. And then the next day they went about their life, slipped right back into the programming that dominates 98% of every action and thought they have. Because it's comfortable. This is why your comfort zone is really your pain zone. So when I have traders, business entrepreneurs, MLM types, online e-commerce types come to me and say, man, I'm so frustrated, man. I'm doing all this work. It's been so many years, and I just can't seem to make progress. Victims. And they believe it. And they're going to continue to be in that loop. Consciously they want it. Consciously they're disappointed. Subconsciously they're sabotaging themselves. Because they've failed to rise as CEO of their life. They've submitted to being a victim because it's the easy, most comfortable path. And they will have those excuses until they make the final conclusion, this is just the way life's going to be for me. I guess I don't deserve it. Now they vocalize consciously the programming that's been set into them from 0 to 7. They now agree with the subconscious programming that says they lack deservedness. Because they've never fought it, because they've never done the battle, because they've never done the work. Because it's more comfortable to not do work than it is to do work, as they see it. It's more comfortable to see themselves as a victim. They see somebody else succeed, and what do they say? Yeah, but you don't have this, and you don't have that. And I have a friend who some of you will hear in the near future. She's going to be doing a talk. What a tremendous inspiration. What a courageous heart. Her husband was deported from the country they were living in because he made too much money and didn't have the proper visa, which would allow him to make that kind of money. She was a 6-figure earner. She gave up her job in that position to go with him, and while he was sitting in detention, she packed their house and their belongings. And they came back to the States. And their marriage was one in which his ego was very strong. And he wanted to be controlling. He wanted to be the force. And he put her into a submissive role financially. She had to beg him for money to buy shampoo. And it took her a while to regain her determination and strength to where she wouldn't be in that submissive role, to be financially, mentally abused. And then she starts building a business. And she starts succeeding with it. And then he intentionally sabotages it because his ego was such that he wasn't going to allow her to be bigger than him. And in that sabotage, he destroys the relationship. He takes her credit card. He empties the bank account. He does things online to sabotage everything she had going. He goes to her friends and business associates and talks about some of her past, which has nothing in any way being relevant to where she is now and where she's going in the future. Left her penniless and destroyed her business. She could have just curled up and given up. But she's accountable. She's responsible. Some of the things that happened to her in recent years could be very easily rationalized, could be very easily, some of them, changed to be legitimate reasons. She doesn't care about it one bit. This is where I'm going. This is where I'm going to set my compass. This is where I'm going. This is where I am. And this is what I'm going to do to get there. Incredible courage, incredible strength. I mean, to see the level of stuff. And in most recent time, while she's building this business, after her husband tries to destroy it and sabotage it, and does a good deal of that, he takes down about 50% of the business. She also played host to friends who moved to where she lived to help build the business with her, where she shared her house, her heart, to help them. And at the last minute, they just decided, this isn't going to work for us. We're going to do something else. Penniless, nothing there. Husband destroyed most of her business. Friends bailing on her. And still, hey, brush off my pants, get back in that saddle. No multi-month pity party. No crying to 50,000 people about, oh, look at what's happened to me. Oh, I'm such a victim. Just reclaim life. Hey, all the better now. Now I don't have these things that have limited me in the past. Whether they were real or real in her head, doesn't matter. Rise up, take ownership, be the CEO of your life. Tremendous inspiration for anybody that'll ever have a chance to hear that story. So you have to decide what's really more comfortable, achieving your dream, achieving your goals, or manufacturing excuses to explain why you didn't get there. And if you're manufacturing excuses, you have to understand exactly what it is. It's not, well, in my particular case, these are logical, rational realities, and if you make choices like that, it's okay, but then you can't moan about why a certain goal isn't there. I didn't think twice about the money that could have been there if I had 100% of my day the way I used to for 5 years. Seeing Dallas hold up a trophy at a major Christmas tournament as MVP, that put a smile on my face. Didn't even think about the money that could have been in the bank, because that was my chosen priority. It was a value that was more important. And I was able to delay the goal in my head. It wasn't an excuse. It was an outright plan. So if you have a goal and a dream and you're crying about not being there, if you're frustrated and disappointed and ready to give up on it, that's because you've allowed things to materialize as priorities in your life. You put higher value on them than your dream. And this is why we circle all the way back to the beginning. Understand how this works. Understand how your brain works. But it starts with the what? The dream. Now, we've talked about this before. I know a lot of people call it the why. That's not the why. It's the what. The why is the passion you have, the feeling you have for going into the future, seeing yourself achieve that dream, experiencing the feeling. Close your eyes, just experience that feeling. And then being able to make that feeling so strong and then bring that future memory back to present and let that passion, that's the why that should drive you. The why is the feeling you got from achieving the what. And if your what isn't big enough, you'll never get there. If your what is big enough, you have a huge what, but the passion for it hasn't been felt, then your why doesn't exist. Simon Sinek, start with why. Your why has to be there. If you don't have a what and you don't have a why, it's not going to happen, because obstacles will be big and you will allow them to become excuses instead of just part of the path. You will allow them to create failure instead of seeing failure as the process to success. And then you will complement the failure by substantiating it. And you substantiating it with believing your own excuses, which are manufactured. And like I say, people do have circumstances. Life does intervene. Mom breaks her hip and she has nowhere else to go, and she moves in with you, and you have to, your family has to go upside down for 6 months. That's a life intervention. And you make it a priority. But remember, you have a choice. Not, I really wanted that goal, but Mom moved in with us. I really want that goal, and I want to take care of my mom. And you put the value on that. You don't have to explain it to anybody. And if you do, if somebody says, why haven't you got there? You don't have to say, I really wanted to do that, but, Mom got, and now you're turning what was a rational, logical priority choice into an excuse. I still want that goal, but I definitely put it on hold temporarily because I made a value choice. My mom was more a priority to me because she had nowhere else to go than getting ahead by 6 months on my stated objectives, and I'm very, very content with what I'm doing. That's how you position it in your head. The trouble is when you cry about not being at your goal, when you are frustrated and disappointed, and you start turning into that victim of circumstance, and it must be destiny, and because you won't look in the mirror and say, it's me. It's on me. My life. I get to make the choices. Where I am as a result of the choices I made. If I don't like where I am, I have to make new choices. Unless something happens and I have excuses and manufacture them if I don't have excuses. No matter what the situation. If you want to be a better spouse, and that requires some very strong proactive effort on your part, and that time and mental and emotional energy is going to displace some that you needed for your bigger goal or bigger dream, your why, your what, then just understand that. There's no greater reward than to be challenged with making yourself a more supportive partner, a stronger partner. That's a worthy goal. Just don't cry about and use it as an excuse to not get where you want to get. If you want to be a better parent and immerse yourself in your children's lives, there's nothing wrong with that. It's very noble. It's a huge sacrifice. But then don't cry about where you are with your big dream. If you want to be the person that's considered for promotion in your company, and you laid out a plan on how to do that, and if you have to make sacrifices at the home front, sit down, explain it. That's your plan. That's your short-term priority. Those are the values that are dominating your life at the moment. You don't have to apologize for what goes on. Don't fall into that trap. Because, I've used the example of the dog pooping in the corner. It does it, first of all, because it thinks it can get away with it and there's nothing offensive about it, or sometimes it has no other choice, right? Can't punish a dog that you leave in the house for 7 hours where you go off, play at the beach. But in the teaching process and the training process, if you just ignore the dog when he poops in the corner, he's going to keep going back and pooping in the corner. And every time he does it, it strengthens, it reaffirms that his decision is okay. Which means his tendency to go back there is higher and higher and higher every time he does it. It's how RIS works. It strengthens the underlying belief. So every time you make an excuse, it makes your ability to make excuses in the future easier. Every time you make yourself a victim, it makes victimhood high on the list in the next time you reach a challenge in your future. If you deny yourself being CEO and responsible for your actions in your life, then in the future it's easier to deny being CEO. It's harder to accept that reality. This is entirely the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror. Don't manufacture excuses. Don't believe your own lies. Reaffirm in the mirror that you are CEO and accountable for what happens from this day forward. And it's okay to stumble. It's okay to fall on your face. It's okay to fail. Because everybody that's ever achieved anything of greatness, 99.999% of them did exactly the same thing. There is that 0.00001% that lucked by making a right guess. It's generally not duplicatable. So don't lead them. Don't be the exception, Hunter. Say, well, look at so-and-so. They did it. And, blind luck happens in anything. Everywhere. All around the globe. That's not mainstream. So don't see failure as your destiny to not make your goal and dream. We talk about morning and evening exercises. We try and form it and talk about that and formalize it, if you will, in a positive sense. Here's one to add to your to-do list. I always like giving an actionable item, an executable item that you can do. If you don't have a journal or a day planner, you can't begin to do this exercise. And we've already talked time and time again about how that's so significant. So I guess if you don't have a day planner, if you don't have a journal that you work in every day, that you don't start your day talking about and writing out what you're going to achieve today and end the day with complimenting yourself for the achievements you made and asking yourself why the things you said you were going to do in the morning you didn't do during the day. Don't allow excuses to creep into that, by the way. So at the end of the day, ask yourself, do this little homework assignment every day. At the end of the day, review your day and ask yourself, list 3 excuses that I made today that are not really excuses. And for each one, why did I want to manufacture that excuse? The answers I can predict. I can forecast. I can grab my crystal ball and be the fortune teller. Most of the time, the answer to that, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but when you start seeing the pattern, you're going to learn from it. Most of the time, the answer to that's going to be because I didn't want to take responsibility for what happened. And so it was easier to make an excuse because that was more comforting. Made me feel like a victim of circumstance. And if I'm a victim, then I'm not responsible for the outcome. Boom, here it is. List 3 excuses I made today. They could be small or big. What were they? And why did I make them? I guarantee if you go through that exercise every day, it's going to be very revealing to your life. May not necessarily change your life. The outcome might be the same, but you might be more content with the outcome because you'll realize they really weren't excuses. maybe in short form, that's what you need because that's the time you had to explain it to somebody to form it in the sense of an excuse. Because guess what? If you use excuses, then you're used to people talking in excuses because that's what you do yourself. Okay. Yeah. That road, there was a detour. I understood why you're 5 minutes late. But out of curiosity, did you leave 30 minutes early? So sometimes you have to explain excuses. You have to use excuses because it shortens the conversation. And sometimes what sounds like an excuse really is a legitimate prioritization that you made. But just don't let it upset you from not making your goal. Don't be frustrated, disappointed, and consider quitting. That's a manufactured excuse. It's not a prioritization. So when we list at the end of the day 3 excuses that we made, I'd say 95% of the time you should conclude that they didn't deserve to be made. And so you need to go through that exercise. They can be little tiny ones. They can be little ones you gave to yourself. They could be ones you gave to family members, one you gave to your boss, one you gave to your upline, one you gave to your e-commerce partner, one you gave to your broker at your real estate firm. Doesn't matter. What excuses did you make today? List 3 excuses. And why did you make them? And then if you want to take it one step further to really discover the power in this, what feeling did I get when I made those excuses? And the answer there is probably most of the time going to be, it was comfortable because then it removed me being responsible for the outcome. See, if you can look in the mirror, you can be honest with yourself. That's what the answer is going to be most of the time. I got a feeling of security, got a feeling of comfort. That's what drove the excuse, and it satisfied that excuse. How dare a manager or an upline or a partner challenge my excuse? Well, we don't like that at all. See, they're mature enough to understand it is that. It's an excuse. It's manufactured. It's not reality. Especially when excuse making, excuse creation, excuse generation, excuse manufacturing seems to be a theme. Once in a blue moon, everybody will accept it because everybody has blue moon exceptions in their life, right? But when it's a daily occurrence, when it's a weekly occurrence, and somebody recognizes it for what it is, and they call you on it, and you don't like it because that makes you feel uncomfortable. He's suggesting I should have been responsible. She's suggesting it could have been different, but I felt more comfortable taking this path. How dare them? When they're right. List 3 excuses you made today and why you made them, and what feeling did you have when you made them. Man, at the end of a month, we're talking almost 100 excuses. And I bet if you consciously make this an exercise, at the end of that month, you have learned a lot about yourself. You will see a common pattern. You'll observe a theme. If you're honest. Celebrate where you are. If you can celebrate where you are, it means you've taken accountability for your life. We all have different things that mean success and create happiness for us. For some, it might be having the best relationship or marriage in the world. Maybe it took giving up income opportunity, and that was the sacrifice that was made because the goal was the best relationship in the world. It takes effort to communicate. It takes time to reflect and to adjust. Maybe you want to be the most immersed parent in the world. Don't let people judge you for success by how much money you make. Being an immersed parent is a huge sacrifice. Not just in time, but in toil, emotion, emotional sacrifice, mental sacrifice. But if that was the goal and you're on the path to achieving it, then don't complain and mourn and be upset with the results that you're getting elsewhere. If you want to make double, triple, quadruple the income this year, it's not just going to happen without sacrifice. And in terms of the parts and components of your life that you touch and that you touch of others, there's going to be sacrifice. This is why with Goalmaker, I push the dream making session so hard for married couples, and to do them independently and then to compare the results. Because then, with the vision being so strong and each understanding each other's vision and dream and the effort it's going to take to get there, you can be supportive in that. You're not going to be the widow of whatever their passion is. Yeah, a long time ago, I had a business partner, and at the time we both had pretty supportive relationships, female types. And we joked because, we gave so much of our energy in life to our pursuit of our business dream. And, the rare deviation for personal enjoyment, we were both big football fans. And the wives, girlfriends were pretty supportive of that because they saw what it was. It was a break in the norm, and it wasn't abused. It wasn't extensive. It was just like, okay, one game a week isn't going to kill them. They're not sitting down Thursday night watching college games, and Friday night watching college games, and Saturday watching college games all day, and then Sunday watching 1, 2, 3 games, then Monday watching pro games. They weren't Thursday through Monday and the beginning of the year, Thursday night football for the pros again. They weren't literally a 6-night a week or 6-day a week consumer of football. We took one game a week. And we made it social, and we had fun with it too. But we saw a lot of other, men who were dominantly watching football. And we decided, we put on our hit list, we were going to make a football widows kit and manufacture this thing that would be supportive of wives whose husbands made them widows because of football. Right? That's where all their time went, and the marriage just didn't deserve enough priority. Fortunately or unfortunately, our principal efforts and the principal thing we were doing consumed so much of our time, we never got around to making that football widows kit. But I believe it would have been very successful in its day. So be okay with where you are if you have priorities and you have values that right now are bigger than the why. The question is, what is the deadline for that? When is that over? And make sure it's really a choice and not something you slid into as an excuse. Because if it's based on lack of deservedness, if it's based on fears and doubts and limiting beliefs about achieving success, and you don't want to face failure in that process because you've misconceptualized what failure really is in the journey to success, it's easy to slide from what you believe is a prioritization, what you believe is a value, and it's nothing more than your subconscious trying to throw a security blanket on you to constantly, forever, find excuses that explain away why you don't achieve the goal that you want, or where you're not where you think you should be in life, or where you said you were going to be in life. This is the danger the hidden danger in the transition, in the bridge between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. Remember, the subconscious mind is so much more powerful. And so when we run into slippery waters between the two, the subconscious mind is always going to win. And so if we have something that's really iffy as a short-term prioritization, our subconscious mind will make it a legitimate prioritization. It'll make it a legitimate value because it substantiates our doubts and fears and limiting beliefs about achieving the bigger dream. And then what it does is it builds on that, just like the dog pooping in the corner. Oh man, they actually believe this as an excuse. Watch how easy it is to give them the next one when this one's expired. Because that's the reality. That's how mind control works. The second, the third, the fourth, the umpteenth time, it's so much easier because the mind's already been tricked into believing it's reality. Man in the mirror, woman in the mirror, be accountable for you. Your homework assignment. Get a journal at the end of each day for a month. List 3 excuses you made today, small to big, why you made them, and then how you felt when you made them. And see how your ego comforts you. See how your ego casts its security blanket on you all the time. And this is an exercise in self-awareness, to see that. Because you can't change something you don't see. You can't change a belief set until you see the consequence of that belief set right in your face. And this is an exercise I guarantee you that will present itself to you. The reality will present itself to you. And then you just have to decide whether you want to live with that reality or not. Some of you, maybe 5 out of 100, will actually do this exercise because the other 95 already know the answer and they don't want to see it presented in front of them. They already know they make themselves a victim. They already know they can create excuses. They're pros at it. This is the whole purpose of Goalmaker, to identify your dreams, go through the goal sheets, set your priorities, understanding there will be sacrifice. Sacrifice now for what you want, or what you want becomes the sacrifice. And it's okay if what you want becomes the sacrifice if you're happy and content with what you have now. All right, do that homework. Report back. Let me know how it goes. Until next time, this is Steve Greger with Next Level Seekers signing off. Y'all have a great day.